The history of man dates back to ages long past, from the first awakening at the rising of the sun to the kingdoms that have risen and fallen over time. Most have been recorded. But all that now rests in documents is but a shadow of all that man have achieved in history. Because of this, little has been remembered of the Plains people, one of the three groups formed out of the ancient Haradrim tribes. The Plains people travelled far south and spread out over the savannas and bushlands, descending into what we know today as the Moredain and Carindrim. Throughout history, the Moredain have managed to keep their culture close to its origins, and have not changed their ways much from those of the first chieftains that ruled the savannas. They live in small communities spread out over the entire savannas of Far Harad. The chieftains often battle between each other to show greater strength, yet never manage to create a centralized power or major civilization. This has most likely been due to not only the constant change in leadership, but also the dangerous wildlife that shares the land with the Moredain, making trade routes near impossible and travel or communication between tribes challenging. The Moredain that lived near the northern borders of the savannas had frequent contact with the Southrons of near Harad from a very early point in time. The Southrons' ancestors were known as the Desert People, another group from the original Haradrim tribes, and although the Plains people and Desert people went their separate ways, this contact was kept to some degree on the northern borders of the savannah. The trade of exotic goods and the aid in combat the Moredain gave to the Southrons became the foundation of a long-lasting alliance and dependency on one another. Hired often for their services in war, the northern Moredain have scattered mentions throughout known tales, but nonetheless have made a lasting mark on the history of Middle-earth. It is said that the personal guard of Queen Beruthiel of Harad consisted of Moredain mercenaries before she made the journey to Gondor. Furthermore, in the siege of Umbar in the year 1015 of the Third Age, King Ciriandil of Gondor was bested and slain in battle by what many sources say was a Moredain mercenary, but a name was never given. However, they were not able to hold Umbar in the end. Still, the northern Moredain endured, unlike their southern brothers, who scattered and awaited their time to retake their land. When Harad was fully under control of Gondor, Gondorian envoys were sent to the Moredain tribes that had stood strong against their ancestors to establish tributary relationships, but they were rebuffed violently. Centuries later, after the grip of Gondor in Harad has decreased significantly, a large part of the Southrons' fight to reclaim their land was aided by the northern Moredain mercenaries, standing side by side with their ancient allies. And later, in the late Third Age during the War of the Ring, when the Southrons went to war on the Dark Lord Sauron's side, the Moredain went with them, and would help them advance north into Gondor. History holds a different story for the Moredain that spread out further to the east, around the Great Lakes of Far Harad and the lands we now know as Touaregs. Much less is known about these tribes, for their isolation from the other Haradrim caused much of their history to have been lost to the ages. We do know, however, that after the fall of the Touaregs Empire, many of the Touaregs, which were the third party to split from the original Haradrim tribes, and were descended from the Forest people alongside with the Limwaith, fled northeast after their empire crumbled and created the city of Kemen-Ka, near the river of Sarek-Duin. They claimed dominion over those lands and took the Moredain that inhabited it in with the promise of protection from the grey demons that were now raiding through the northern part of Touaregs. The eastern Moredain tribes that lived there were met with a new and terrifying creature that came from the volcanic island of Tol Torog. Outmatched by the new enemy's rage and size, the Moredain fled west and south, as the half-trolls slowly expanded their conquest south and westward. The promise made to protect the Moredain in turn for service wasn't kept, and Kemen-Ka eventually fell to the creations of Sauron. And so the eastern Moredain were chased out of their homelands, and for many generations after they lived in hiding from the half-troll band that would meet their way, the half-trolls were pushed back by the Moredain, and they inhabited the lands around the Great Lakes of the east once again. A bloody guerrilla war endured between the half-trolls and Moredain, with half-troll marauders smashing tribes of Moredain to pieces, and the Moredain scouting and hunting for lone demons to take down. Sensing an opportunity in this seemingly eternal conflict, Sauron promised an end to half-troll attacks if the eastern Moredain pledged loyalty to him. In desperation they agreed, and at once the half-troll raid stopped. The Eastern Moredain praised Sauron as a god and saviour ever after. Is it not ironic how Sauron manipulated the Moredain by offering them protection from the very thing he created? The southern Moredain, living in the fertile lands near the jungles of Far Harad, were met with an entirely different fate of their own. They produced more food from the land than their kin in the north, thanks to the healthy and wet soil of the south savannas, and hunted in the jungle instead of on the great plains for their food and glory. It was not until the great Touaregs Empire expanded and took over the lands of the southern Moredain that they were faced with major conflicts. Treated as slaves, they were forced to produce food for the empire, with any form of rebellion squashed by the mighty Touaregs. And so it continued for many years, until slowly but surely the Touaregs lost their grip on the Moredain, and the southern Moredain got greater footholds with their rebellions. They managed to unify in numbers large enough to bring down the empire that had enslaved them. How this happened has been a mystery to all but those who were there. Legend tells of a Touaregs high king who was lost to a madness that turned him against his own people, causing the empire to fall from within. The culture of the great Touaregs Empire, however, did change the lives of the southern Moredain forever. The remains ended up being ruled by the Moredain and Touaregs alike in petty chiefdoms of mixed cultures, until it became a singular, new culture based on traditions of the former empire. After thousands of years, the jungle dwellers among the southern Moredain no longer consider themselves a part of the plains people, but instead identify themselves as the current-day Touaregs. And so came it to be that a once small group, spread out over plains and lands, never unified, yet ever more so. They are tribes that have had survival in their blood since day one, ever standing with endurance against any test of time thrown at them. Now they move to war in the north, or have left the plains for a different lifestyle. It is worth contemplating how much a simple folk manage to endure, whilst the largest kingdoms are brought to ruin. Perhaps that close connection to tradition is what keeps them alive.